The ancient world is replete with narratives that challenge our understanding of human ambition and divine authority. Among these, a few resonate with the profound implications of the story found in the 11th chapter of Genesis, the Tower of Babel. This narrative, concise yet potent, offers a foundational explanation for some of humanity's most defining characteristics. It purports to explain the bewildering diversity of languages that separates us and the scattering of human populations across the vast expanse of the earth. More than a simple origin story, it delves into the complex interplay of human will and divine judgment. The tale of Babel serves as a stark reminder of the consequences that can arise when human aspirations directly confront what is perceived as the divine order. It is a narrative that compels us to consider the very nature of defiance and its ultimate repercussions. In the aftermath of the Great Flood, the biblical account describes a unified humanity speaking a single language. This linguistic homogeneity fostered an unprecedented unity of purpose, leading them to the land of Shinar. There, they conceived of a monumental undertaking, the construction of a city and a tower. Their stated ambition was for the tower's summit to reach unto heaven. This phrase, reach unto heaven, is often interpreted not as a literal attempt to pierce the celestial sphere, but as a symbolic aspiration to divine status or an audacious challenge to divine sovereignty. Their explicit motivation was to make a name for ourselves, a declaration steeped in human pride and self-glorification. They sought to establish an enduring legacy, a monument to their collective power and ingenuity. This desire for fame and self-exaltation was intrinsically linked to their aim to prevent being scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Their building project was thus not an act of devotion or a tribute to the divine. Instead, it was a testament to their own perceived greatness, a bid for a unity and renown that would rival, or even usurp, God's authority. The core transgression lay in this profound act of self-elevation, where human glory was prioritized above all else. They sought to forge a singular, unassailable identity, independent of any higher power. The motivations of the Babel builders, when viewed through a theological lens, reveal a direct and profound act of disobedience to a prior divine command. Following the cataclysmic Great Flood, the biblical narrative records God's explicit instructions to Noah and his descendants. They were commanded to be fruitful and multiply, and crucially, to replenish the earth. This directive implied a dispersal, a spreading out of humanity to populate the newly cleansed world. The actions of the tower builders stood in direct opposition to this divine mandate. By consolidating their efforts in a single city and constructing a central tower, they actively worked against the imperative to scatter. Their project was an attempt to maintain a concentrated population to prevent the very dispersal that God had seemingly intended. This collective decision to centralize rather than spread effectively defied God's overarching plan for the world's repopulation and development. It represented a conscious choice to remain unified in one place, rather than fulfilling the divine instruction to fill the entire earth. The biblical narrative portrays God observing the ambitious undertaking at Babel. His assessment of their unified purpose and collective power is presented as a critical turning point. He recognized that if humanity, speaking a single language and united in such a singular, self-serving purpose, were allowed to continue unchecked, nothing will be restrained from them. This statement is profoundly significant, highlighting a perceived danger in unchecked human ambition. It suggests that such a unified, self-directed power, devoid of divine acknowledgement or moral compass, could lead to unforeseen and potentially catastrophic outcomes. The narrative implies that this unity, fueled by pride and disobedience, possessed the potential for further, even greater transgressions against the divine order. God's intervention, therefore, can be understood as a preventative measure, a necessary disruption to avert a future where humanity's collective will might lead to an ultimate challenge to divine sovereignty itself. It was a recognition that such concentrated power, without humility or divine guidance, could become a force for profound evil. The divine response to the builders' ambition was swift and decisive. God intervened by confounding their language, a miraculous act that instantly shattered their linguistic unity. This sudden inability to understand one another created immediate chaos and confusion among the workers. The once seamless communication that facilitated their grand project was irrevocably broken. With mutual understanding impossible, the coordinated effort required for such a massive construction project collapsed. The builders, unable to cooperate or even comprehend each other's instructions, were forced to abandon the tower. This linguistic fragmentation directly led to their dispersal, as they naturally gravitated towards those who spoke their newly formed tongues. Thus, the very outcome they sought to prevent, being scattered across the earth, was precisely what God's intervention achieved, fulfilling the original divine intention for humanity's spread. The question of why God chose to intervene at Babel has been a subject of extensive theological debate and interpretation. One prominent view posits that God's action was a direct response to human pride and rebellion. The builders' desire to make a name for ourselves and their attempt to reach unto heaven are seen as a direct challenge to divine authority, an act of hubris that demanded a divine check. This perspective emphasizes God's sovereignty and his intolerance for human attempts to usurp his position. Another interpretation suggests that God's intervention was an act of mercy, preventing humanity from reaching a point of irreversible moral decay. If nothing will be restrained from them, it implies a potential for humanity to descend into greater sin or to develop technologies or powers that could lead to self-destruction. From this viewpoint, the confounding of languages was a protective measure, limiting humanity's capacity for collective evil by fragmenting their unity. It was a divine safeguard against unchecked human potential for transgression. A third perspective views the event as a necessary step in God's plan for human diversity and the eventual spread of his message. By scattering humanity and diversifying languages, God ensured that different cultures and nations would emerge, each with its own unique path. This dispersal, while initially a judgment, ultimately laid the groundwork for the later call of Abraham and the development of distinct peoples, setting the stage for a broader, more complex divine narrative of redemption and relationship with diverse nations. To fully appreciate the Tower of Babel narrative, it is crucial to consider its historical and cultural backdrop. The ancient Near East, particularly Mesopotamia, was home to monumental ziggurats, terraced pyramid-like structures with temples at their summits. These impressive constructions were built by human hands, often dedicated to local deities, and served as centers of religious and civic life. The biblical description of the Tower of Babel bears striking resemblances to these real-world structures, suggesting the narrative may have been influenced by or was a commentary on such architectural feats. The story can be seen as a polemic against the pagan religious practices and imperial ambitions prevalent in the region. While Mesopotamian ziggurats were built to honor their gods and connect heaven and earth, the Babel narrative reinterprets this ambition as human pride and defiance against the one true God. It contrasts the self-serving motivations of the Babel builders with the true purpose of worship. Furthermore, the narrative reflects ancient Israel's understanding of its own identity in contrast to the powerful, unified empires surrounding it. The story subtly critiques the centralized power structures and the deification of rulers common in empires like Babylon. It champions a divine order that values dispersal and diversity over monolithic human unity. The narrative thus serves not only as an ideological myth for language and dispersion, but also as a theological statement about the nature of true power and authority. contrasting divine sovereignty with human hubris. The Tower of Babel narrative continues to resonate deeply in contemporary thought, offering profound insights into human nature and societal dynamics. Many modern interpretations view the story as a timeless allegory for the dangers of unchecked human ambition and technological advancement. In an era of rapid global communication and interconnectedness, the concept of a unified humanity capable of immense collective action takes on new significance. The narrative prompts us to consider whether our pursuit of technological mastery or global unity might inadvertently lead to a form of collective hubris, challenging ethical boundaries or divine principles. The story also serves as a powerful commentary on the complexities of communication and the persistent challenges of misunderstanding. Despite our advanced tools for global interaction, linguistic and cultural barriers continue to create divisions, echoing the original fragmentation at Babel. It reminds us that true unity requires more than shared language. It demands shared values, humility, and a recognition of something greater than ourselves. Furthermore, the narrative invites reflection on the balance between human freedom and divine guidance. It asks whether humanity, left entirely to its own devices, is prone to self-destructive tendencies. The Tower of Babel, therefore, remains a potent symbol, prompting ongoing theological debate and philosophical inquiry into the nature of progress, the limits of human power, and the enduring quest for meaning in a diverse and often divided world. The narrative of the Tower of Babel, though ancient, continues to provoke profound questions about human nature, divine will, and the trajectory of civilization. It is a story that transcends its biblical origins to offer a timeless commentary on ambition, unity, and the consequences of defying perceived divine order. Whether interpreted as a literal historical event, a theological allegory, or a cultural critique, its core message remains potent. The story compels us to consider the delicate balance between human aspiration and humility, between collective power and individual responsibility. It challenges us to reflect on the true nature of progress and the potential pitfalls of unchecked ambition. What do you believe was the primary sin of the builders of Babel? Was it pride, disobedience, or something more fundamental about human nature? And in our increasingly interconnected world, are we in some ways building our modern-day Towers of Babel?